Krishna has listened like a doctor, like a psychoanalyst. He's allowed Arjuna, without interruption, to explain exactly how he feels. And Krishna has not interrupted at any point. But at this point, Sri Krishna begins his teaching. And this is the teaching which removes all suffering. That's the point of the Bhagavad Gita. The teaching which Krishna is now going to impart. See, Krishna says, as if smiling, spoke these words. And of course, he doesn't just mean the next verse, he means the entire Bhagavad Gita. Okay, and this is where the teaching begins. In many commentaries, they will not comment until this verse. Shankaracharya, the famous Shankaracharya, who consolidated the Advaita philosophy. He didn't invent the Advaita philosophy, he consolidated it. Doesn't start his commentary until this, chapter 2, verse 11, when the teaching begins by Krishna. Okay, so let's see what Krishna says. Okay, Krishna says, Shri Bhagavan Vacha, Ashochanam Vishochastvam, Pragnavadam Stapasase, Katasum Makatasum Scha, Nano Shochanti Panditaha. Panditaha there, so he uses the word Panditaha. So who's a Pandit? Your dad's a Pandit, isn't he? It is a priest, absolutely. In the Vedantic times, in the veins of the Vedas, it meant a man who had Panda. And Panda is the knowledge of the Atman. And this is the knowledge which removes all suffering. It's called Atma Jnana. Jnana is knowledge. Atma is the self, the true self. Sri Krishna is going to impart Atma Jnana. He goes right to the root of the problem with Arjuna. From the very start, he doesn't play around, he goes right to the root of the problem. So we see from verses 11 to 25 a very detailed explanation on the nature of the self, the nature of the soul. Tat Tvam Asi. Okay. So if you remember, there's three causes of suffering. What do we say those three causes of suffering? This is the reason we say Shanti, Shanti, Shanti 3 times. What was the 3 causes of suffering? I'll give you this. Adi Devika, Adi Bhutika, Adi Atmika. Okay. Adi Devika was the suffering caused by the devas, by the elements. Adi Bhutika is the suffering caused by other beings, Bhuta, other beings. The examples they give in the scriptures is often lions and tigers, but that doesn't affect us so much here in Newcastle. We were talking about humans, other beings, Adi Bhutika. And of course, Adi Atmika refers to the problems we create by ourselves. Our mind can create many problems because we're not seeing the reality. We talked about that last week. With our senses, with our Gyan Indriyas because they're controlled by Indra, who is the mind, our mind can misinterpret the world around us, and that causes a lot of suffering to ourselves and to others. Okay, so those are the 3 causes of suffering, roughly speaking, but they all can be solved with Atma Jnana. Atma Jnana is what the Bhagavad Gita is going to teach us. He goes to the root of our problem, which is avidya, which means lack of knowledge of our own true identity, who we really are. And he's going to tell Arjuna who he really are. So he uses the word here, pandita. So he says, you have grief for whom there should not be any sorrow, yet you speak words of wisdom. The wise do not grieve for the dead or for the living. The wise do not grieve, do not sorrow for the dead or the living. So, in a nutshell, we are all eternal. Nobody really dies. That is the message right from the outset of the Bhagavad Gita. And it's not just the Bhagavad Gita, of course. Religion itself rests upon the eternal nature of the soul. But in Vedanta, we don't rest on belief so much, we rest on experience. We have to realize this truth, which means we have to have a very clear idea about what the soul is. Okay, the soul is. So as we've spoken before, we had a diagram, didn't we, about the antakarana. So you have the antakarana, which is the mind, intellect, chitta and ahamkara. The soul is that which illuminates the mind, intellect, memory and ego. Okay? That is the eternal essence. That's it, perfect, that's the picture. So really, I'd prefer if that said Atman, because the soul can be, there's different definitions of the soul, but in Vedanta, we're very clear there is one Atma, and it's synonymous, which means it's the same as Brahman, the underlying supreme reality. And Krishna is going to talk about the nature of the Atman over the next 15 shlokas.